Calling all detectives. Antique Egyptian jewels, broken pottery, and a fabric design. Those are the exhibits on this page from my casebook. The casebook of Jerry Browning, private detective. In my years as a private detective, I, Jerry Browning, have seen people try to steal everything from a railroad to some broken hunks of pottery. I stood alongside Clifford Beamish, curator of the Wentworth Museum, watched while a couple of attendants swept up the fragments of a glass display case. Up to an hour ago, that case had held a tablet inscribed with Egyptian hieroglyphics.
Mr. Browning, this is the second theft in a week. Last Thursday, the Egyptian Hyksos jewels disappeared, and now we've lost the Ankh-Mem tablet writings.
Well, what do the missing items look like, and what were they worth? Beamish handed me a catalog.
You'll find complete descriptions here. As to value, the Hyksos jewels are appraised at $4,000. The Ankh-Mem tablet at only $700.
I leafed through the catalog. Where could a thief unload stuff like that, Mr. Beamish? Beamish shrugged.
The jewels are semi-precious, valuable only for their antiquity. The tablet is worthless, except to a scholar. Those items are unsaleable.
We left the gallery and walked on into Beamish's office. There was a tall, weedy-looking youth sitting at a desk. Beamish introduced him as Gordon Wentworth, grandson of the museum's founder. Wentworth brightened when he heard I was a detective.
Have you any theory about the thefts?
I said no, it was too soon for theories. Wentworth looked disappointed and wandered off. A couple of minutes later, while Beamish was writing out a retainer check for me, Beamish and I dashed out. We found a crowd around still another shattered display case. I saw Wentworth bend over the case, then straighten up again.
Browning, our primitive pottery shards are missing. The thief has struck again.
While I was being hired to investigate thefts at a museum, another display case was smashed and some pottery fragments stolen. I wanted to have the entire gallery roped off and all visitors in it searched. Neither Beamish nor Wentworth would permit it. Back in the curator's office, gentlemen, I think we're up against a vandal of some kind. The museum needs police protection. Both Wentworth and Beamish looked terrified. Rather than have that sort of publicity, they were prepared to accept the losses. And since the Wentworth Museum was a privately endowed institution, they were well within their rights. I walked out of there muttering to myself about people who hire a detective and then won't take his advice. About all I could do was hang around the place and hope to catch the thief red-handed on his next attempt. Except that there was no next attempt. After the business of the pottery shards, the theft simply stopped. By then, I'd been around the museum long enough to recognize most of the regular visitors. There were two of them who stood out from the rest. The first was a man who sat hours at a time on a portable canvas stool and copied pictographs, figures, and hieroglyphics in the Egyptian gallery.
I am Henri Dubois. It is I who create the exclusive Dubois fabric prints, and it is this room I thank for my inspiration, no?
I agreed that the gallery was very inspiring. Dubois was deft and fast. His skillful fingers could easily have made off with the vanished exhibits, and the camp stool he lugged around could conceal jewels in its folds, or a tablet, or even broken pottery pieces. My number 2 suspect also hung around the Egypt room. His name was Khalik, a gentleman from Memphis, Egypt.
I come from a district close on the ruins of the ancient Memphian civilization. For me to visit here is like spending a happy afternoon with my venerable ancestors.
I remembered movies in which small, swarthy men like Khalik would go to any lengths to restore missing treasures to the tombs of their ancestors. I shook myself. The Egyptian gallery was giving me the creeps. I went on outside and lit a nice, modern cigarette. After a while, I made up my mind about what I needed to do. Beamish and Wentworth were in the curator's office. I gave it to them flatly. Gentlemen, with the restrictions you place on me, there isn't anything I can do except quit the case. They both looked a little relieved. Beamish mumbled that he expected no refund from me, and Wentworth shook my hand.
Enjoyed meeting you, Browning. I'll look you up when I get back.
Fine. Where are you going? Wentworth was casual about it.
Little digging in Egypt.
Beamish wasn't satisfied to let it go at that.
Gordon is too modest. He's a fine archaeologist. If it weren't for his expeditions and brilliant discoveries, the museum would languish. But thanks to Gordon and his finds, we never lack for financial support.
Wentworth looked embarrassed.
Being an archaeologist is just a job, Mr. Browning, like being a detective.
I grinned at them, said I hoped the missing stuff would turn up somehow, sometime, and walked out. But I didn't leave the museum. Instead, I went on down to the basement, prowled around until I found a wooden crate marked Wentworth Expedition, Cairo, Egypt. This was obviously the equipment Gordon Wentworth intended to take along with him. I picked up an iron bar and... I was so absorbed in forcing a slat off the crate that I didn't hear the footsteps behind me until it was almost too late. I started to turn and took the blackjack blow on my shoulder instead of my head. After that, I had no more trouble with Mr. Wentworth. Picked him up, carried him upstairs, dumped him into a chair in front of the astonished Beamish. Here's your thief, Mr. Beamish, Gordon Wentworth. That case downstairs is loaded with Egyptian stuff that he meant to take along with him, and salt in his digging. You'll find your missing jewels and tablet and pottery shards in there, along with uncatalogued stuff that he lifted, to prove what a fine archaeologist he is. Well, Wentworth confessed after he came to that he'd been stealing from his own museum to maintain financial support for it, and incidentally for his own job. The thing never was made public. Wentworth resigned from the Board of Trustees and as archaeologist for the museum, which changed its name to the Orient Museum. As for my two suspects, Khalik the Egyptian gave the reorganized museum $1 million for a really big-time expedition, while Dubois created a print he called Orient Romance and made the museum the most popular place in town. Like I said, the more nearly worthless a theft appears to be, the easier it is to find the one person to whom it can have any possible value. Listen next time to Calling All Detectives, mystery drama, mystery quiz, and a chance for you to match wits with yours truly, Jerry Browning, Private Detective.